So, what are the keys to success for an entrepreneur these days? A new book by Wharton's Lori Rosenkopf delves deeper into this. The book is titled Unstoppable Entrepreneurs: Seven Paths for Unleashing Successful Startups and Getting Value Through Innovation. And she joins us right now. Lori, great to talk to you again. How are you?
Doing fine, Dan. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. What had you researching this idea in the first place?
Well, I just believed that role models matter for entrepreneurship. And there's a media stereotype that's so pervasive. That's one way of being an entrepreneur. Drop out of college, get venture funding, build a unicorn. But I was seeing so many different pathways that our students, as well as our alumni, were following, and wanted to provide some new role models and new ideas and show that there's no one size fits all path.
So, with all that's going on right now, how do you define entrepreneurship at this moment?
Take a very broad definition. I define entrepreneurship as value creation through innovation. There are so many ways to create value. And of course, financial value is very prominent, but there's also social value. Are you impacting society in a healthy way? Emotional value. How does it make you feel to do this sort of innovation and the like? So entrepreneurs are creating value, and they're doing it by innovating. That innovation might be product, process, business models, service, but it might also be something as simple as figuring out a new routine in your home life or family life. All of those things create value for us. And that starts to make us realize that everyone can be innovative and entrepreneurial. And I hope it'll inspire people to be all the more entrepreneurial.
What's interesting is that obviously a lot of the attention goes to the big name, well-known, and probably in many cases well-funded entrepreneurs who have had, incredible levels of success. But as you kind of alluded to, and you can expand on a little bit more, there are so many other avenues for people to create success through entrepreneurship, social being one, so many other things going on in one's community. I mean, it is just not narrowed down to just the successful these days.
Absolutely. Do you know there are 31 million enterprises in the US? 29 million are sole proprietorships. So this might be the person who mows your lawn or who does your nails. But there are many, many people who are doing small business entrepreneurship. We tend to focus on high growth entrepreneurship, which is in many cases funded by venture or by any sort of debt. But those are less than 20% of all of the entrepreneurial activity. Most activity is actually bootstrapped. So each of these, the disruptor, the bootstrapper, the social entrepreneur, these are all pathways in the book.
For the longest time in doing the shows that I have talking about entrepreneurship, the one thing that obviously still comes up is, it's a challenge. There is a level of failure that is in there. It might not be the first idea that you end up being successful with. It might be the second or third. Is there enough recognition of that right now that is kind of part of the process?
Well, that's why my book is called Unstoppable Entrepreneurs. I talk about an entrepreneurial mindset, which has 6 R's, and one of them is resilience. Each of the entrepreneurs that are profiled in my book had many, many obstacles and challenges. And part of their ability to succeed was having, some people call it growth mindset, some people call it grit, but a mindset that allows you to say, I'm going to need to try a lot of things in order to get to the finish line. I'm going to hear negative feedback, and I'm going to treat that as a learning experience and then adapt my efforts in order to do better with that. I'm going to deal with crises like COVID or the current economic conditions. And there are many, many ways to solve these sorts of problems. And so each of my entrepreneurs are incredibly resilient. And that's something that everybody can work on, understanding that feedback is always a gift.
How many of the group are the so-called disruptor? And in general, is there a ratio of disruptors that you expect to see coming from the role of being an entrepreneur?
I love that question because disruptors are, of course, the people who we see all the time in the media, these celebrity entrepreneurs in many cases. It turns out that disruptors are typically venture backed because they're trying to overturn an entire market. Venture backed entrepreneurship is far less than 1% of all of that enterprise that's out there. So it's actually very, very uncommon. But when done well, the returns are enormous. So they are getting most of the attention. But most efforts toward disruption fail. There were many, many car sharing services that were attempted. We had one that students were working on at Wharton way back when. And now, of course, Uber dominates that market. Lyft is a very serious second. And now, of course, Waymo is automating it completely. But there were hundreds of attempts at car sharing. So most disruptors are not successful, but all the attention goes to the small percentage that are.
So you mentioned social a little while ago,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously we're in a time where social issues have become very, very important, kind of across the board of how we live our lives right now. So then, are we seeing a sharp rise in social entrepreneurism as well?
Well, I've been at Wharton for over 30 years, and certainly 30 years ago, we weren't seeing a lot of students saying, I want to be social entrepreneurs. These days, in our efforts at Venture Lab, we see about 1 in 7 of our students who are doing something entrepreneurial will raise their hand and say, I'm a social entrepreneur. Now, that doesn't sound like a ton, but if you ask the students a different question, and this is so fascinating to me, if you ask them, do you have impact goals in your company? So meaning, do you have other goals beyond your financial ones? Then 70% of them will say, well, of course I have impact goals. So more and more with the emphasis on, of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals and all the interest in climate tech and other sorts of community issues, we're seeing more and more students and more alumni build those sorts of aims into their ventures, but they're a little bit reluctant to claim the label. And I think that's because some people hear that label and say, oh, it's a nonprofit, or it's not really intending to be as big. But the social entrepreneur I profile in my book is doing incredibly well.
I mean, we talk so much about entrepreneurs, but you also bring up the component of the intrapreneur, which maybe doesn't get as much conversation, but the component of somebody working at a company who comes up with a great idea and maybe works with their company to develop this new idea. How frequent, how common is that these days?
I'm so glad you asked, Dan. 70% of all innovations that are developed in established companies. So there are tons of opportunities for people to be entrepreneurial in their companies on their employers' resources and devoting their time to the development of new businesses.
How does the company then react to that? Because I think it's a unique dynamic where a company probably has their normal process in so many areas, but has an employee maybe come up with something that could be transformative.
Well, some companies try to embrace that in their culture and will devise all sorts of structures and processes to encourage that. The example that gets thrown around these days, Google gives 20% time to employees to work on something of their own choosing. That, of course, is an outgrowth of 3M's 15% time that's been around for decades. Many companies that have enough resources will create a separate part of the organization where people can experiment in ways that might conflict with what's going on in the core business. And that separation is incredibly important until something new happens. Other companies use hackathons and the like to get people exploring ideas, but there are quite a few people who come up with a new idea in an organization and find that they can't get enough support and wind up leaving and developing it somewhere else.
Is the entrepreneurial mindset, is it organic or is it something that can be developed?
It can definitely be developed. While there are some people who will tell you the story, and this is about half of the entrepreneurs in my book will say, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was selling candy in middle school and the principal suspended me, and tell those kinds of stories. The other half are people who were doing the more standard path and started to see over time opportunities to create value and then went on their own to do it. And these people can be trained to do that. Among the R's in my entrepreneurial mindset is recombination. And what I mean by that is taking your knowledge and experience from different places. You've worked in different companies, you've taken different courses in school and certifications, you've lived in different places. Everyone has a unique set of experiences, and mixing and matching all of that knowledge is what gives you the opportunity to identify a unique opportunity. And when you can do that, that's the root of innovation. And all of us have the capacity to look back at what we've accomplished and try to think about those combinations. And then as I'm advising people to look forward, I always say, what can you do that will allow you to think differently? If you're a college student, can you take a minor in something different? Or if you're further grown, should you take a certification? Or could you take some sort of a trip? Or could you take an art class? Whatever it might be, that's what starts to give people the chance to see those unique opportunities.
One of the other R's that you bring up is relationships. And look, that's so important in business in general, but especially for somebody who's starting out trying a new idea, to be able to have the relationships that are going to help you build to success. It has to be vital, especially today.
Absolutely. Relationships are giving you an opportunity to access knowledge and resources and talents. You need people to help you assess whether your idea is addressing a big enough pain point, help you understand the bigger market so you're not just solving your own problem and hoping people will come to you, but that the market is desperate for it. You need those relationships to get funding in many cases once you get to that point, and that gives you access. And you need the talent that people can provide to you. You want to be working in the space that gives you the most joy, where your genius zone, some people call it. You want to be able to attract talent that's going to complement your skill set as your organization grows.
You talk with a lot of great entrepreneurs in here, and if I can highlight one who is somebody that I know, and I've talked with her a few times over the years at Wharton doing interviews, is Caitlin Grasso with Generation and the idea of networking, but networking, thinking about it through the process of what women are experiencing right now. And I told Caitlin that when my daughters get old enough, they're going to go with her on a tour. Talk a little bit about what she has done and what she has brought to the table.
I'm so glad you asked me to do that rather than asking me to pick my favorite subject of all of them, because I love them all equally. But Caitlin is a great example of so many of the things we've been talking about. Since a young age, she always wanted to do things for young girls and was doing it all throughout her Wharton career here. She graduated in 2015. She was one of the first people I met when I became Vice Dean of Undergrad in 2013, because she came bounding into my very first office hours, because she is the best networker that I know. But she built out, with the support of some Penn Awards after she graduated, she built out Generation to take girls, as you mentioned, on bus tours to learn about opportunities that would help to further their careers. And this was chugging along nicely, and then COVID happened. Yeah. Talk about resilience. You can't take a bus tour. And she had to convert everything to virtual. This wound up being the seed that's led her business to explode, because once she was virtual, she realized she was an ed tech, and now she's building curriculum that she can sell to educational institutions. She can sell to corporations. She has lots of girls that are subscribing, and the company it's incredibly profitable. So she calls herself a social entrepreneur, but she has a very strong profit motive as well. She has 10 employees. She's doing fabulously.
Having written this book now, what are you most excited for, potentially, for the future of being an entrepreneur?
Well, I think we're going to see all the more entrepreneurship right now. We're obviously in a period where there's a fair amount of job dislocation. So people are saying, how can I apply my talents in a way where I have a little bit more control and can take care of my needs for income and security and the like. So I think we're going to see a lot more people looking for ways to participate. I also think at this moment, with all that's going on with AI, this is an important moment for everybody to be training themselves and the tools because you want to operate as efficiently as possible. But there's also a lot of opportunity for those high growth oriented entrepreneurs to start building in this new AI ecosystem. So I think it's a big moment for entrepreneurship.
Lori, thanks very much for your time. All the best with the book. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
You got it. Lori Rosenkopf of the Wharton School. The book is titled Unstoppable Entrepreneurs: 7 Paths for Unleashing Successful Startups and Creating Value Through Innovation.